She doesn't leave when she stops loving you. She leaves when she stops respecting you. That's the part they don't tell you. Because love can survive distance. It can survive arguments. It can even survive betrayal. But the second respect dies, so does everything else. And here's the truth. Most men don't even notice when it happens. Because respect doesn't disappear loudly. It slips out of the room while you're still trying to be understanding. And by the time you feel the cold, she's already gone. Emotionally, spiritually, sexually. Even if her body's still next to you. And you think, she's just stressed. She'll come around. It's just a phase. But it's not a phase. It's a funeral. You just haven't read the eulogy yet. The signs, they're always there. She doesn't argue anymore because she no longer believes your opinion matters. She stops dressing up because she doesn't care if you notice. She starts talking about space. But really, she's creating distance she doesn't plan to close. And the worst part? It's not always malicious. Sometimes she doesn't even realize she's doing it. Because respect doesn't just die because of one mistake. It dies from patterns. From you betraying your own word. From you constantly explaining yourself. From you putting her comfort above your edge. You thought being calm made you strong. You thought being available made you valuable. But in her world, you became forgettable. And when a woman forgets why she once respected you, she starts testing. Not to reconnect. To confirm what she already suspects. You're not that man anymore. It starts small. She interrupts you. Not playfully, dismissively. You finish a sentence, she changes the subject. You offer a boundary. She smirks. You speak your truth. She calls it dramatic, and you let it slide. Because you don't want to argue. Because you think keeping the peace will bring her closer. Because you still believe that if you stay good, she'll come back to who she was. But here's what you missed. That wasn't an accident. It was a test. She wants to see if your words still carry weight, if your voice still has spine, if the man who once didn't need to explain himself is still in there somewhere. But when you hesitate, when you clarify, rephrase, soften your tone, she knows. She knows you've become afraid of conflict, afraid of loss, afraid of not being seen as the nice guy. And in that moment, you stop being a man in her eyes. You become a figure, a structure she can lean on, but never be moved by. Because the moment she senses that your words are suggestions, not decisions, her respect starts bleeding out. You don't need to yell. You don't need to control. But you need to speak like you remember who you are. Like silence is your choice, not your cage. Like your no means no, even if it makes her uncomfortable. Because here's the truth. A woman will challenge your voice to test your value. And if your response sounds like negotiation, she won't argue. She'll just never trust it again. She stops arguing, stops explaining, stops reacting. You think she's just tired, busy, distracted, but you feel it. She's not with you anymore. You touch her, and it feels polite. You share something vulnerable, and she nods, disconnected. You ask what's wrong, and she says, "Nothing. I'm fine." But she's not fine. She's finished. Not with the relationship, with the version of you she once respected. And this is the second test. Not loud, not direct. It's absence in presence. She wants to see if you'll notice, if you'll call it out, if the man who once could read energy in a room can even read what's right in front of him now. But instead, you doubt yourself. You question your gut. You try to give space like you read in some self-help thread. You keep showing up, hoping presence will substitute for power. But she doesn't want a body next to her. She wants a man who can see the shift and name it, who can say, "Something's changed, and we don't ignore things here." But you didn't say it. You swallowed it. You hoped your patience would impress her. It didn't. It confirmed what she feared. You're asleep. And a sleeping man is a man she can't lean on, can't follow, can't desire. Because even if she doesn't say it out loud, there's a voice in her head screaming, "Wake up, or I will leave quietly." And when she leaves like that, she doesn't come back because she didn't leave the relationship. She left the man who couldn't sense when it started dying. She starts doing it in front of others. The little comments, the subtle jabs, the sarcastic jokes about your habits, your goals, your masculinity, and you laugh it off because you think she's just being playful, because you don't want to make it a big deal, because you think it'll pass, but it won't. This is the final test. She's not teasing. She's measuring. She wants to know if you'll flinch, if you'll push back, if the man who once held his frame in silence still has a spine beneath the smile. Because when a woman loses respect, she stops guarding your image and starts erasing your authority. Not with screams, with social needles. She makes you small, so she doesn't have to admit that she's already made you irrelevant. And every time you let it slide, you're not preserving peace. You're signing off on your own erasure. You think, she didn't mean it. She's just moody. She's having a bad day. But the truth is, she's done following you. And a woman who no longer follows you will start testing how far she can lead you before you even notice you're not in front anymore. That's what this is. Not humor. Hierarchy. And the second you let her speak to you like you're someone she doesn't fear losing, you become exactly that. A man she can lose without ever looking back. Because respect doesn't die all at once. It dies in a room full of people where she jokes. And you just sit there, laughing at your own dismantling. Once the tests are done, the shift becomes permanent. She no longer waits for you to lead. She leads herself. You mention plans. She shrugs. You ask for time. She says, "Do whatever you want." But it doesn't sound like freedom. It sounds like distance. Because what you're hearing isn't trust. It's disengagement. She no longer invests in us. She's already reallocating energy to me. And the worst part? She doesn't even hide it. The texts slow down. The nights out increase. The phone flips face down every time it buzzes. And you feel it. Not in the big moments, but in the tiny shifts that used to mean everything. You try to bring it up, but now you sound emotional. Now you sound needy. Now you are the one chasing clarity she no longer cares to provide. Because to her, the man she respected would have never let it get this far, would have never needed to ask if her attention was elsewhere, would have never apologized for having standards. But you let too much slide. You prioritized harmony over truth. You thought presence would make up for power. And now, she's gone. Not physically, not yet, but spiritually, she's already 2 cities away. And if you say nothing again, if you choose patience again, if you play the understanding card one more time, you'll wake up next to a woman who looks at you like a coworker. Because that's what you've become. A man who clocked in, showed up, followed the rules, and still lost the game he never even realized he was being tested in. Martin Swam. Let's be clear. She didn't stop respecting you because you failed. She stopped respecting you because you forgot who you were. The man she once admired had a center. He had a standard. He had an edge sharp enough to bleed silence out of any room he entered. But slowly, you traded that edge for peace. You started explaining too much. You stopped holding your ground. You let disrespect slide because it wasn't worth the fight. But here's the truth. Every time you avoided conflict to keep her, you lost a piece of yourself. And she felt it. Not because she wanted you to be harsh, but because she needed to know that the fire she once respected hadn't gone cold. You didn't lose her. You lost your reflection. You looked in the mirror one day and saw a man who smiled too easily, apologized too often, and stood for too little. And the worst part? You thought that made you mature. It didn't. It made you safe. And safety doesn't inspire loyalty. It inspires boredom. Because the man who's too safe to draw lines, too scared to be misunderstood, too desperate to keep her happy, is the man she stops looking at like a leader. She doesn't want a tyrant. She doesn't want a lapdog. She wants a man who speaks once and means it, who looks at a room and owns it without raising his voice. She wants to feel your presence more than your availability. But now, you've been too available, too agreeable, too forgettable. And the moment she felt she could walk all over you, she stopped wondering if she ever could lose you. You don't get her back by chasing. You don't get her respect back by explaining. You get it back by becoming the man she didn't believe you could be. Not to win her, to win yourself. Because somewhere in that quiet, in those moments alone when her voice isn't there to distract you, you finally hear a sound you forgot. Your own. The sound of a man breathing again without permission. The sound of a man sharpening the parts of himself he dulled just to be accepted. You stop seeking validation. You start setting standards. You stop waiting for her to notice. You start noticing what you've allowed. You start waking up earlier, moving with intention, speaking less, but louder, not in volume, in meaning. You don't post quotes about respect. You embody it. You stop asking what she wants. You start becoming what you want to follow. And slowly, not through force, not through manipulation, but through presence, things shift. She starts watching again. She hears your tone and feels the spine behind it. Not because you're angry, because you're anchored. You no longer argue. You just remove access. You no longer explain. You just state. You no longer try to impress. You intimidate. quietly, completely. And that moment, when she realizes she doesn't control the emotional climate anymore, that's when she asks herself, did I lose him? Or did I kill the version of him that allowed this? The power dynamic flips the second you remember who you are. She doesn't own the emotional weather anymore. She doesn't decide when it rains and when you beg for sunlight. You do. Because now, you're no longer trying to earn space in her world. You're building your own. And in this new world, you don't need motivation. You move from conviction. You don't seek closure. You walk with clarity. You don't scan her face for signs of softness. You look in her eyes and search for signs of alignment. Because respect, real respect, is not about fear. It's about direction. And now, you have one. You have standards she either rises to or walks away from. Not out of bitterness, not out of revenge, out of self-respect. Because once you've been dismissed, mocked, and emotionally unfed, you learn to feed yourself on solitude, discipline, and silence. And that man becomes dangerous. Not because he's violent, because he's no longer accessible. He doesn't explain his glow-up. He doesn't announce his comeback. He just starts moving differently. And the world reacts, including her. She may try to re-enter, through softness, through nostalgia, through subtle curiosity. But this time, you don't fall for familiarity. You look for respect. And if it's not there, you don't raise your voice. You don't send long texts. You don't fight. You simply say, you had access to a man I no longer am. And you walk. Not because you want her to chase, because you finally realize you're the one who chooses now. All this time, you thought it was about her silence, her coldness, her shift. You made it your mission to fix what was broken between you, to rekindle a connection, to find the man she would admire again. But the truth? It was never about her. It was about the moment you started measuring your worth by someone else's approval. The second you handed your masculinity over to someone who didn't build it. You stopped standing on your code and started dancing around her moods. You traded your edge for the illusion of emotional safety, and you lost more than her. You lost you. But now, after the fall, after the disrespect, after the silence that cut deeper than any word, you don't just rebuild, you reclaim. Every moment you stayed silent when you should have spoken, you speak. Every time you tolerated what drained you, you walk. Every habit that kept you soft, you burn it. Because you don't need her respect back. You need yours. That's the twist no one talks about. It's not about getting her attention. It's about commanding your own. You wake up now, not for her love, not for her body, not for her validation. You wake up because there's a man in the mirror who's been waiting for years for you to return. And today, he's watching again. He sees the spark, the fire, the frame, and finally, he nods. Because now, you don't need to be told you're enough. You know it. She'll notice it one day. Maybe when you walk into a room and don't look her way. Maybe when your voice doesn't tremble at her silence anymore. Maybe when she realizes you're not checking if she's watching. Because now, you're too busy leading your own life. And in that moment, she'll feel something she hasn't felt in years. Respect. But this time, it comes too late. Because now you've learned, respect doesn't start with her. It starts with you. With the way you look in the mirror. With the way you speak to yourself. With the way you choose to walk away from anything that shrinks you. You no longer bend. You no longer chase. You no longer explain your standards like apologies. You enforce them like laws. And when someone crosses the line, you don't correct them. You remove them. Because the man who remembers who he is doesn't wait to be chosen. He chooses. And the final test? It isn't hers. It's yours. You'll look at the version of yourself who begged, softened, shrank, and you'll forgive him. But you won't return to him. Because now you speak with your eyes. You move with your silence. And when they ask you, why did you change? You smile, not out of arrogance, out of completion. And you say, I stopped being the man she could walk over and became the man she'd never get the chance to test again. And just like that, you disappear, not in anger, in clarity. Because when a man reclaims his self-respect, he doesn't make noise. He becomes the silence they'll never be able to fill again.